I'm Josh Cooperman from Convo by Design, and this week on WestEdge Wednesday, this program, Small Space, Big Style, the ADU Revolution, covering a topic that is of interest to many, if not all, about not only getting small, but providing this necessary space, be it the granny flat, the home office, the studio. It's a very cool conversation on a stage designed by Julie Beuerlein of JKB Home Design, and the stage this year, the theater, for WestEdge 2024 was presented by Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home, a Best Buy company for whom we are extremely grateful. Beautiful stage, great topics. This one is moderated by Frances Anderton, who always does an absolutely incredible job. Frances, take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Josh. You are buttering me up, but that's okay. Keep on buttering. Good morning, everybody. And to Julie, who did this amazing layout, I think we're all getting a bit comfortable for a Saturday morning, snippy-snap conversation. But anyway, great to see you all. Hope everybody's warm. As you see, one of our guests has already wrapped herself in a blanket. So yeah, it's a great brisk day here at the airport, and really, fun to be here. First talk of the day on Saturday for WestEdge, talking about this topic of ADUs. So is there anybody in this space here that doesn't know what an ADU is? I'd be very surprised if there's anyone that doesn't know what an ADU is, because they are so very, very popular and becoming such a in demand sort of product space on the back of the property, and very much something that's very appealing to a lot of architects and designers. And what are the numbers here? This is incredible. I mean, what we used to know as a granny flat, an illegal property, added or an adapted garage, they became legal, termed accessory dwelling units in 2017, expanded to encompass JADUs, massive hit, apparently, of almost 30,000 residential permits pulled in LA last year. More than 10,000 were for ADUs. We all know they're built for lots of uses, possibly a first home, a guest house, a rental unit, a home office, a yoga pad, or some other kind of space. Creative launch pad for some architects. They have been touted as a solution to our affordability crisis. The jury's out on what role ADUs play in that, but where the jury is not out is how much these have become a new typology that has been fully embraced. Also changing ideas of space, of scale, of relationship to the backyard, all sorts of questions. So we're going to discuss all of this. You're very lucky to be hearing from a great lineup. We have lost one of our speakers, Tyler Velton, who unfortunately got sick, but 3 is a perfect number, and I'm thrilled to be joined here by my old friend, Joan Barton, contractor, founder of Dirty Girl Construction. What better name could you come up with for a woman-led contractor? Hello, Joan. And she knows how to dress for the weather. Marcos Santa Ana, architect and general contractor, founding principal of Alloy Architecture and Construction, and A.G. Rue, architect and founding principal of her own firm, RLR. So, welcome all 3 of you. The way the format is going to work right now is each one of them has given a few images over that have been put together in a roll of images there. Feel free to sort of peek at the images as each one by one, talks a little bit about their work, themselves, and specifically in relation to ADUs. And after that, we'll have a conversation. And if we have time left at the end, we'll take questions from the floor. Is there anybody waiting that wants to get a seat? Please, please step forward. We've got plenty of chairs. Don't want you to have to stand the whole time. I guess you want to stand. Okay. Anyway, so let's see. I don't think it really matters which order you speak, because the images are just keeping on rolling. So Why don't we start with you,
you start with
Joan?
me.
And just one last thing, Josh. Just housekeeping. Josh mentioned that this is going to be recorded for a podcast. So what that means is, one, I guess, try not to shout out in the middle of stuff they're talking about. And the other thing is, I'm going to urge the guests here to sort of not kind of stop and say, well, let's wait for this slide to come up that has a picture of a kitchen that I did. We're going to sort of try and not have that happening. So with that said, feel free to look at the slides. And Joan,
Yes.
look at the room.
I want to see what we're putting up. I don't know what's up there.
Oh, you don't know what you put up of
Well,
your
I
own
know what I
stuff?
sent you, but
Oh,
I don't
there
know
we
what's-
go.
I'll just pretend that
Just pretend
It's all mine.
it's all
Yeah.
yours. Yes, yes. So, Joan, I know you have plenty to say, but I just, if you will, could you just start off with your funny story
Sure.
about how how you first encountered the ADU, which was the opposite of the situation now?
Right. So many years ago, I'm like 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and Francis and I were talking about the explosion of ADUs the other day, and I was talking about how when I first started out as a builder, excuse me, we had to actually go through and undo all the illegal granny flats because the city was coming through trying to, I don't know if they were trying to just get money or get, I don't know what the end game was, but what was happening was they were saying all these people are living illegally in the backyards and nobody had a permit and there's converted garages and converted carriage houses and they didn't want people living back there. So we ran around covering up the work because you couldn't just get rid of these places. People actually lived in them. So I got hired to go from carriage house to carriage house to carriage house to cover the work so they could have the inspection and get their clearance to keep the structure, and then everybody would move back in. And it was this whole exercise of saying nobody lives here, but we all know everybody lives here. And here we are years later, encouraging people to put these things in their backyard because we don't have enough space for people to live. And I think what's happened is the lens got wider. It was a very narrow lens during that exercise 20 years ago of let's get rid of all this, not thinking forward to the fact that we have a population that outdoes our housing in this particular city and in a lot of cities. So we're now putting back into place legally structures that can house the overpopulation of children coming home who need housing, adults coming home to live with their adult children and all of that. But the office space, the yoga space, all the things that have happened during the pandemic. I mean, we're really creating, establishing some ground rules for how you can create more space on your lot and also dealing with lot coverage rules that changed, I don't know when, 2009.
2019.
Thank you,
Yeah, that was
2019.
the major change.
Yeah, so
What
not,
was the change in 2019?
you want to speak to
Yeah,
that?
well, I mean, the ADUs have been in existence actually, like before humans existed almost, where you always had, you had your family, you needed more space, so that was always in existence. But technically, when it kind of the biggest boom happened in LA, I feel like was in 2019 when they had where they started encouraging ADUs, making it a lot more accessible. But yeah, likewise, that's kind of where we kind of mostly had most of our clients come to us, say, hey, we need some ADU, we love this idea. Like Joan was saying, most of the time they always had the ADUs, but it wasn't legal. Right? So, but yeah, for us, I think our first ADU project was 2020 or so.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, just super quickly, Joan, back to you. Just tell us a little bit about the ADUs that you've done, then we'll hear from each of you, and then we'll just continue this dialogue.
Okay, well, right now I'm working on, and I think the image will go, no, the image actually won't be up because we're working on it, but we're doing a proper ADU that truly will be an ADU, because a lot of them aren't, so we'll talk a little bit about that. I mean, in the sense of no one's going to live in them. So right now we're working on a property in Rancho Park that is a rental property. So it's got a 4-bedroom house, and they're in a neighborhood where they're close to Century City, where there's a lot of people that come in and do work. It's close to the hospitals, traveling nurses. So the whole idea is we're building this extra ADU as one more space that could be rented on this property to increase the value of the property and increase maybe the volume of people that can live there, or maybe it's an out office, but it's really a proper ADU. Most of what I build, when we're talking about ADUs, are not actually used for living spaces primarily. Primarily, they're used as sound studios or creative offices, extra space for when people come to visit. They're truly guest houses or workspaces. So there's some images that will go up. Usually they're around pools, strangely. Some of them, you know, we've got a hillside build out in Mount Washington. The ADU is probably $800,000 or $900,000. It's a house. It truly is a house, and it's, you know, it's caissons. It's 24 caissons. We're digging into the hill. It's concrete and glass, you know, raised with a outdoor area underneath. It's beautiful, but it's a miniature house. And I think what we've discovered, probably all building these, is it's a place where we can really kind of get your juices flowing for that extra little jewel box of a space that people need, but they can be really cool. Others are more guest houses for when people come to stay, 2-story little colonial style, French colonial style. There's one that's going to pop up. I can't remember what I sent you some other ones, but there's nothing that's strictly speaking, which the ADU I think used to be where it's like just a converted garage. That used to be the idea of the ADU. These are really little homes, and they're costly sometimes.
Yeah. No, I think of the ADU as being like sort of the bikini of the swimsuit line. You know, it's like less fabric but more cost per square inch.
Yeah.
But let's hear a little bit from Marcus and AG, and we'll carry on. So Marcus, tell it you've got an abundance of little structures on your website.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I don't know how that sounds, but abundance of little structures. Anyway, yeah, like I mentioned, we've done tons of ADU designs. We've done a couple ADU builds as well, since we're both architects and contractors. But yeah, I mean, some of the images that you can see on the slide there range, kind of like Joan was mentioning. A lot of our clients come to us specifically for personal use. So I want the ADU, I love the ADU idea, but I really don't want to rent it out. So oftentimes it becomes either like a cabana house next to a pool, as Joan was mentioning, or some of our clients want to use the ADU as an office space. And with the added benefit, I have a kitchen, I have a bathroom. If I have my family members coming in, they can use that space. So a lot of our clients are going that route with the ADU. We also do have some clients who are using it as a development project. So those particular clients, obviously, they're going to use it as rental income. We're also working on it's a 30, I think it's about a 30-unit apartment complex, an existing 30-unit complex, and they're wanting to convert one of the recreation rooms into an ADU. So, you know, it also extends to multifamily as well.
Hang on, how many units are in the building? 30?
Yeah, there are 30 units already in the building. And so one of the extra kind of bonus rooms we're converting to an ADU as well. So like in the multifamily world, you can add up to 25% of the current units that you have to be converted into ADUs. So
and is that
very excessive.
But is that a separate building, not attached to the 30-unit building?
That particular one is attached.
Right, so that
But
would be
you'll
like
also-
a JADU.
This is a JADU?
That's
Well, technically, we're going to go with an ADU. But yeah, the JADUs, you know, maximum you can go with is 500 square feet. But the ADU, you can go up to 1,200 square feet typically. So,
Right.
but yeah, in the multifamily world, a lot of people, you know, because, I mean, we can talk about a lot of the different requirements, but one of the issues is parking. So just recently, I think it was a year ago, 2 years ago, actually this year, they removed the requirement for parking, like period, which is interesting. And that's for residential and commercial buildings. But before that law took place, if you had an ADU within a half mile of a public transit, you wouldn't have to add that additional parking space. So a lot of multifamily buildings, usually there's, I mean, depending on the size of multifamily buildings, you have multiple levels of parking below, like subterranean or semi-subterranean. So a lot of multifamily users are converting those parking spaces into ADUs.
Right, interesting. So the law passes and there's sort of unexpected consequences. You know, things evolve in ways that one couldn't necessarily have predicted. AG, let's hear from you. And I I'm wondering, is Josh around? Because I would like to keep the volume down up there if we can. Oh, well. Anyway, AG.
Hi. I started my practice in 2018. So that was basically right around when the ADU ordinance was adopted. And I've worked on a number of ADUs since then. And similarly to what they've been saying, a lot of times I do feel like they are usually for the homeowners' use rather than as additional housing. But there really has just been such a diversity in terms of scale and budget and use. And I have worked on ground-up ADUs too, but there are still conversion projects as well. And a lot of times I find that clients are wanting to add them to larger projects on the main house. And some of the things that Marcos addressed about like getting rid of parking requirements and setbacks. When you incorporate an ADU, you can actually have more freedom to design the main house. So I think they'll kind of just be like, oh, well, we can incorporate an ADU, and then we have this extra space, and we can maximize the main house as well.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that in different cities, the ADU affords you different allowable things on the main house. So like in Santa Monica, and the laws keep changing. And this is an evolving thing. This has
Right.
not stayed the same since we started building ADUs. You used to have to put in a separate sewer line, a separate meter. Like, it was very costly in a different way,
Right.
and now they got rid of that, and then the parking changed.
Hang on. They've got rid of the separate sewer line.
Yeah, at
This is
first
probably
you
the
had
sort
it-
of useful information. They've got rid
It's
of
very
the...
useful in most
Yeah,
areas.
because the sewer line was really costly.
It was really costly. So it depends on how many bedrooms you have sometimes and what city you're in, what part of the city. All of that, there's no one answer to what you're allowed to do on every ADU. There's neighborhood-specific plans for a lot of these places. But in general, what you want to look at is whether or not that ADU is going to maximize anything else for you on the property. Like, is it a pro or is it a con? You can't look at it as its own thing. You want to look at it in relationship to the house, I think personally, to see what it affords you on the larger build, because most of these are part of a larger build. Not many people call us up and go, I just want to convert my garage. Sometimes, but not often. And when that was happening, when this first started, I would say, okay, well, you need to do a separate sewer, a separate meter, you have to do an additional parking space, la, 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 la. And by the way, that's all $100,000 more than you want to spend on top of what you're already spending. So the ADU kind of faded out. The housing crisis didn't change. The city caught up and said, okay, how do we work with everybody? And is this really necessary? So you have to stay on top of what's going on in order to really get your design to fit the code and the budgets.
Yeah, no, we can, address the affordability thing in a minute. But AG, does that sort of correspond with what you were saying? That's your experience. So you were saying that.
Yeah.
So you work on the back unit. That means that people can then do more, or
They could expand the addition to their residence because they can go out further than they normally would have, or go into where the driveway would have been required to be, for example, or even attach the main house to the ADU. And then, you can design the ADU to be connected to the main house so that there's actually, it becomes a part of the main
Right.
house as well, so.
So, okay, so we all knew these illegal additions that, by the way, used to be called, there was a term back in LA about 100 years ago, the term was lot packing. And because people literally packed their lots with properties. And then with R1, I guess, and then parking mandates and blah, 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 they got, outlawed. But we called them granny flats. The ADU law gets passed. How many grannies are actually living in these ADUs? It sounds
Zero.
from what you're saying is that there's not many grannies or grandpas.
No, I think if there is a granny, it's part-time. Maybe it's once a month, or sorry, not once a month, once a year for a month.
So visiting granny.
Exactly.
It's not Granny that's helping with the kids, because there was this really, frankly, a kind of lovely idea of how the ADU might be used, which is to increase a kind of intergenerational living that was not possible under the old rules. And that was definitely the way these were kind of pitched to us all, was we could sort of open up to bringing, working families could have Granny at the back who could help with the children, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes the idea was that, I guess that it would even switch around, that people would move into the back, would move into the ADU to then perhaps rent out the front. That was another idea that was floated. But you're saying that's not the way it's really panned out. It's really panned out as an addition to, it's making the big house even sort of bigger and better.
Correct. Yeah, I think for owner-occupied properties, or if someone's living in their house, it's usually not a rental. Not always, but mostly.
Right.
But if it's a second unit, if it's for like small-scale developers who have additional properties, then 100%. It's used as extra rental income, which of course in turn is good for the state or the country because it's adding extra units. But most of the time, yeah, if it's owner-occupied property, it's essentially for either their family on occasion or it's for their families for just daily use.
Right. So what that means in terms of all of you designing and building is generally, what does that mean that the ADU is designed in relation to the house, as in it perhaps faces the house because it's part, especially if it's a pool, a guest for a pool house, say, or is it facing out? Because I know the really interesting thing about the ADU as a rental unit for a complete stranger was, okay, where do you put the front door? Do you face it into the alley to make complete separation? What are you finding mostly in terms of that?
We turn anything that's going to be truly a rental, we turn to the alley. Mm-hmm. The front door or the private entrance and exit is on the alley. Because most people don't know their renters or don't want to know their renters in Los Angeles. That's just the truth of it. They don't want to be friends. They just want the money. But at the same time, we're also talking to families about where are you going to, for families that are going to stay in their homes, because there's different types of people who buy homes here. Some are in for 5 to 7 and some are in for 30, right? So for those families that are really going to raise their kids and grow old in their homes, you want to talk about the long-term lifetime of the ADU and what that could be over time. Because in the beginning, it might be for the nanny or the grandma or whoever is taking care of children or helping you. It might be an office. But as your kids get older, especially with what I think most of us in this audience are dealing with, the sandwich generation, where a lot of us are taking care of kids and parents at the same time, that ADU is going to transition with the needs of the family. It's going to solve a lot of problems. And hopefully we can make them a little more accessible for our older people, because not being able to connect an ADU directly to a home is to me, is a failure of what we're trying to solve. We have a lot of elderly people who should be able to get in and out of the main house without having to go outside with a walker or a wheelchair. I mean, there's reasons behind everything, but I think we're going to see some of these things change as the generations change, because we're serving different communities that we thought we were going to serve when we first started the idea. It's not really renters. I think it's just allowing families to get through these times in a way that we did back in the 30s and 40s and 50s.
Oh, so it is then fulfilling
I think it is.
that
I think it
idea
does,
of meeting intergenerational needs.
Yeah, without
Okay.
living on top of each other.
Right,
Yeah.
right. What about you two?
I feel like clients will plan for it to be that way and like also want to consider resale value, and even if they're not using it that way, that other future owners will be. But I do think that one of the most interesting things about designing ADUs is the relationship to the main house, and like whether you're going to face it or turn away from it, reference it or ignore it, like stylistically, for example, you always have to address it
Right.
in one way or another.
So I'm just thinking of one house we call the Yin Yang house, where we Completely, it was a full remodel to the house, the existing single-family residence, and our client wanted a separate ADU in the back, detached. Like AG was saying, trying to design that relationship between the two structures, so it creates a nice, interesting design opportunity. So we call it yin-yang because the front of the house, of the main house, of the single-family home, had sort of like a perimeter, let's call it like a sheath almost in architectural language, but it actually tilted back away from the sidewalk, whereas the back unit had the same architectural language, but that like sheath form or whatever slid forward. So like you can kind of play around with the architectural forms, so they play off each other, like a symbiotic relationship kind of thing. So it does, for architects, it's really interesting and fun because you get to play around with two different structures now. But then also with respect to like codes and whatnot, the two-story ADUs, especially if you're converting the back garage oftentimes, if you want to go with a two-story ADU, you're going to have to deal with other items besides just the planning department and the building department. You have to deal with the utility company. So typically, if you're going to two-story, and a lot of properties in LA have utility poles with wires, et cetera, in the back along that back lot line. So the taller you get up, the further you have to step the structure away from the power poles. So like AG was talking about with respect to privacy, if you are going to rent the space, you want to make sure you're not, let's say you have a two-story house and you have a nice back balcony that looks in your backyard. You don't necessarily want to have a balcony in your rental unit facing your balcony as well. So what we've done before is kind of collaborating all those different ideas together, having the back two-story ADU have its own back balcony because it has to step away from the utility poles and the wires as you go up. It creates basically an empty void space which you can use for balconies, for example. So in turn, that back unit has their own privacy, has their own nice balcony, and it completely is separate and private and nice for that rental.
And it has the buzzing wires overhead.
Yeah, exactly. It's great views of the wires, right?
Yes.
But that's where planting and landscape design comes to play. So.
Until they make us drop them underground, because that's also happening.
Right, exactly. If underground is much better, of course.
But before they go underground, I'm glad you brought up the wires, actually, because I guess there was, for a while, there's been a lot of kind of optimism about the idea of doing prefab or modular ADUs. And then what I'm hearing is, well, actually, that's turned out to be pretty difficult because the utility poles are in the way and this thing's in the way and it's very dense. And so has that been a sort of a building type you've tried to work with? And have you found it's worked or not?
I have seen proposals for prefab. I have never built a prefab. I've looked at plans for a prefab, people thinking they were going to save money. And then we explained to them that they're basically shipping in their walls, and we still have to build everything underneath and inside. And I've never seen a scenario in my career where it saves money. It could save time, and I think it depends on the structure. But that being said, there's so many unique things on every lot, like Marcus is saying, like the power lines or the alley or whatever, a zillion things. I'm not going to name them all, that you really have to consider that make that second structure unique, that I don't see how going prefab could satisfy all the needs as well as someone just designing it fresh and building it fresh. Because you're also going to run into things at the city. Like, I hate to always say this, but we're at a space where you design something that you think is going to get through the city, and then you get down to the city and they go, oh, no, right? Oh, no. 90% of it, but not this 10%. And then you have to go back and find the loophole that either gets you through or you have to do some redesign. And those things change every couple of years. Or you find out, oh, I'm in a methane zone, so I can't actually build this ADU as I want to, and now I've got to, demo the slab and like there's so many things. So feasibility is important, doing all the research, but you're always going to get down to the city and find out that one little thing that's going to shift. So if you're in a prefab, that might really affect the thing that's already in production. So for me, I'm not a fan. In Idaho, sure. in places where there's a lot of land and not a lot of rules, like Tulsa, Oklahoma, as Josh likes to say. Do whatever you want. Or maybe in Northern California. I don't know, maybe I don't work up there. You probably do, but I have not found it to be helpful for me.
I actually don't know too much about it, but do either of you have experience with the pre-approved plans?
Teeny bit.
Which is different, by the way, from modular or prefab. This is city-approved plans that...
That are architect designed and pre-approved.
Yes.
So homeowners can, I guess, adjust to their property. But I agree, like there's just so much that each site dictates that I can't imagine that it would save that much time.
Yeah. We haven't built any prefab or modular ADUs. We have built prefab / modular / yeah, there's so many slashes.
Slashing.
But, let's see, panelized maybe is the right word, or
Yeah.
semi-stick-built projects. So we've built where the assembly is essentially like, let's say 500 or 400 pieces to put together the house. So we did a duplex where both of the units were panelized homes with the metal structures. So that, I mean, it's not an ADU, but it is two structures, both single-family homes. But technically, whether you call it ADU or home, it's sort of the same. It's pieces of wood and concrete, et cetera. So, and we're also building another house, which is all panelized but made out of wood. So conventional lumber with like a zip system already applied to it, the exterior sheathing, which comes with a waterproofing barrier. So, but like Joan was saying, whenever you do either a prefab, modular, or all that kind of stuff, great in the desert or great where you have lots of space to play around with. But LA, it's difficult. So, you know, the more you go prefab, the less restrictions, the better. Just because, and that's why panelized comes into play, because everything has to be essentially semi-prefab, I think, in LA, because you can't just produce these things and just drop them anywhere, you know.
Is everyone familiar with the phrase panelized? Can you just explain what panelized
Yeah, sure.
means?
So panelized is essentially the entire house comes on a truck, and it's 500 pieces, and each wall is, let's say, 4 feet wide, but let's say the ceiling is not 9 feet high. So you have a 4 foot by 9 foot high panel, and so in order to build the first floor, there may be 50 panels that are already prefabricated. So the idea is that less waste on the site. It's already, all the cutting and whatnot is done in a factory. And so it's supposed to make it a lot faster. And so in order to make it faster, you just have to make sure that all the ins and outs of, because for example, like I know Joe knows all the time, but concrete, most of the time concrete is never level and perfect, and all, you know, that kind of thing. So when you're dealing with prefabricated structures, you have to, there's always the space between site-built irregularity with shop-built precision. So you have to design systems that can take that into play. So there's always a tolerant space. You know, like as an architect, we draw these straight lines and nothing's ever straight. So that's the thing. Like as a builder, you're always trying to figure out, okay, especially if you're doing a remodel, you know, the walls are like this, and then you know we have this beautiful structure that comes in perfectly straight. You know? So that's where, you know, you're building LA when you have so many, like very few vacant lots, right, are here in LA. So that's where I think panelized can be tricky. And the idea of cost savings can also be variable. Potentially, like Joan was saying, speed. You know, potentially speed is an option as a benefit for panelized or prefab. But
Got it. Now, one thing I've definitely heard from architects working with ADUs is that they love them for the jewel, for making the jewel box. And not just making a jewel box, but making a jewel box that perhaps can be kind of architecturally sort of expressive in a way that's quite different from the main house, if the client so chooses, and they're quite different from each other because they're not forming a street facade. So it's in the backyard. So it's like a bit more playful, room for a bit more play. Not in every instance, of course. But is that something you're finding, that the clients kind of perhaps allow a little bit more
Yeah, we call it the
creativity?
powder room. It's the powder room. And we all joke about it, but like you walk in and it's the sexy powder room, you know? If you're not living in, it's also a different way to express your own desires. A lot of us, I think a lot of us that are in design and building go like, I want to own 20 different houses because I don't have a style that I like best. I have all these things that I like. So it's sort of like a East Coast house where there's different wallpaper in every room and a different feel. It gives you that, oh, maybe I like modern, but I don't want to live in modern, but I could build a modern ADU. I see a lot of that, you know. So,
That's funny.
yeah. I want to live in it, but I'll work in it. Yeah.
Or with architects, I want my clients to have it, but I wouldn't live in it myself.
Right.
No.
Yeah, and so I don't know for both of you if that's an experience, but I find that a lot of times that ADU is a secondary expression of something people feel.
I think both of what you said, definitely, and it's just people feel they can afford to be more adventurous and not like something that they wouldn't want to live in. They would be happy to experiment with in the ADU.
Yeah. Also, so we have some clients who, let's say it's the first time they buy a house and it's a 1940s house in LA, typical. They're able to live, let's say, even if it's a small house, even better. If it's a 1,200 square foot house, they're living in the front house. There happens to be a dilapidated garage in the backyard. They love modern homes. Okay, so they can spend X amount on remodeling this 1,200 square foot house, or they can create something fresh from the back. Mm-hmm. And then if it's big enough and they have the size capabilities, they can live in that back house and then remodel the front house later, right?
Yeah.
Or they can demolish the front house. So it's kind of a way to have a brand new house right away and still add value to your lot. So we've seen that as well.
Let's talk a little bit about cost, because I think sometimes the costs can deliver surprises. So for anyone in this room that might be sort of pondering whether to commission one or build one, what should they know about in terms of the bumps in the road kind of cost-wise?
I so don't
We've
want to
talked
start
about the sewer line. I
I'll
know
go
the
first if you want.
I mean,
All right,
the sewer,
I'm
right
gonna
at the
tell-
outset, the sewer lines were surprises
All right,
for people.
so square footage, let's just talk about a flat lot, you know, access, normal thing. People often come and say, I'd like to build an ADU for $150,000. And I go, like, you can't. It's not a thing. The cheapest one I've built is hovers around $300,000 for a small, 400 square feet. So you're talking about $700 to $1,000 a square foot by the time you're done. The bigger ones are actually less per square foot, but they're more money in the long run because you're doing much more eccentric or luxury type builds. So our highest cost per square foot for building in LA right now is running around $2,000 a square foot. That's extraordinarily high compared to the rest of the country. But I think on average we're sitting around $900 a square foot right now is what I'm seeing. And I don't know what you guys are seeing, but that's what I'm seeing as a builder.
Well, what I was going to say is a lot of clients think I already have this space. It's already finished. It already looks like a guest house, so we just need to permit it.
Yeah.
But, you know, like a new build ADU is a new build, so obviously that's expensive, but even a conversion is basically a new build. Like these are older structures, they have to be retrofitted by the time you're done with everything. Get the utilities, the insulation, the finish is all up to date. It's like a...
And the plans and the permits. I mean, all of that
yeah,
goes into
yeah.
it. It's
Plans and the
you're
permits.
building a house.
Right. Yeah, so one needs to be very aware of that. This is not an add-on, it is a house. It's a little
Yeah, you're
house.
not just putting a toilet in your garage.
But could you do that? Like, could
Yes,
that
but
be
it
an
wouldn't
option?
be an ADU. You have to add one cabinet with a microwave sitting
Yeah,
on
what
top.
makes it an
and then-
ADU? Actually, what makes it an ADU?
You have to have two cooking things. Like you have to be able to heat up two different ways. So like a stovetop, a little, you know, range will work, or a cooktop and a microwave. You have to have a bathroom and you have to have a sleeping area. And I think the minimum, I can't remember what the minimum square footage is. Is it
I
100?
think it's like 200 or so.
200 something. I know I can squeeze you into pretty small space, but there's rules about things. There's other rules too, though. I mean, there's all sorts, there's rule now where everybody has to have solar if it's new construction, although there are exemptions, and I have studied those and we're getting them. But there's a lot of things that go into what does it mean to live in an ADU, and some of those restrictions or codes are more restrictive than they are in the main house. And so if you don't know what you're getting into, if you think you're just going to convert your garage into a place that you can sleep legally, it's not going to happen. That's not how it works.
Right. It could if you don't go to the city.
Yes. You could have an illegal granny flat with no grannies in it, and you're back. Yeah, I mean, you could go sleep in your garage. Nobody's going to stop you.
Marco.
Yeah, so the least expensive ADU is going to be the garage conversion, where most garages are a little bit under 400 square feet. So that's going to be the least expensive way. But like AG was saying, you can't just, you're going to have to reconstruct most of it. That's the issue. So again, I go back to the whole 1940s world. Most homes are built in that area, some up to like 1910 or so. But if it's under like 1930, just destroy the house, destroy the garage and start over, Between ideally 40 and up, there's a potential to rehab.
Between 1940 and up.
Yeah, 1940 and
Yes,
up, yeah. Usually that's where, even for houses too, if you buy a house, try to buy a house 1940 and newer, ideally. That's when the concrete is much better. If you go,
Foundation.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you go earlier, oftentimes you'll find the foundation is made of wood, which is silly, or at least like the cripple wall is made out of wood and there's like a little bit of concrete below. So that's the key when you're looking at houses. But as far as the garage conversions, if it is 1940 and younger, then you're still going to have to underpin the foundations. Back then, they didn't have the shear lateral forces for earthquakes was all built into the stucco. So the stucco became the shear panel in an earthquake event. So you're going to have to strip the stucco. You're going to have to add hold downs, steel pieces in the corners. You're going to have to add plywood. So by the time it's said and done, you're going to be stripping the finishes. You're going to be slicing holes in the concrete slab. So in some cases, you'll only have one little piece of concrete in the center of the 400 square foot garage. So that's, and now you have this old piece of concrete that, so anyway, so just long and short of it is, that is the least expensive, but still it doesn't really give you the bang for your buck that you're hoping for. So, bang for your buck, you build new kind of thing. So.
How many of you have clients that, look very sad after they've heard all of this and say, perhaps I won't do this?
I think if you explain to them how much money they're going to get back, if you know that formula and you know what that outlook looks like, then it becomes a doable conversation. The upside is bigger than the downside.
Right.
But you have to prepare them for the initial, I don't want to call it the downside. You have to prepare everybody for reality and then talk about ROI, return on investment. You have to actually have that conversation and know what those numbers look like in order to, I don't want to say sell the idea, but make sure that people are getting into something that they can afford to do, that they know will recoup in X amount of years, so that they are making a good decision and they're not, putting all their money into something that's going to get them into a place where they can't stay in their home. It's an investment, and you have to be willing to come to the table with some knowledge behind that to help people out.
Yeah. You could just look on Zillow or Redfin or whatnot and see what is the price per square foot of the house as it's being sold, and so you can always do the back calculation of how much am I going to spend on the construction costs plus the design, et cetera. Even if it doesn't exactly balance out, historically in LA, the equity is just doubling and sometimes over 4 or 8 years, et cetera. So you do have to look: is it a long-term investment, or is it something you're going to just build and you want to sell the whole place? But that brings up another new law that just came out, which is, they call it like the ADU condo law. So essentially now the state allows it, but they're allowing each local jurisdiction to make their own ordinances to try to figure out how the process goes. So for example, let's say you buy a house, you build an ADU in your backyard. Let's say it's $800,000 for the ADU. you can now sell the ADU to somebody.
So you can split the lot.
No, that's a separate world we can talk about. But this
SB9.
law, yeah, that's the SB 9. But the ADU quote unquote condo law, you don't have to split the lot. So you can actually just sell the house, and then you have created an HOA and the whole kind of thing.
I see.
It's an equity share, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's an equity share.
Huh, that's
So I don't think the city of LA has their ordinance ready yet, but maybe someone out here knows. But the state allows it as of this year. So that right there, if you instantly want to, you have to do the cost-benefit analysis, obviously, of the cost for the development, and then see if it makes sense to sell it right away. But people are thinking about that as a good way to, let's say, you're in your retirement age, right? And so you could build your ADU, rent it out for X number of years, and then eventually you could sell it as a condo itself or whatnot. So
That's interesting. Interesting.
I think when you're thinking of ADUs as investments, and if you are going to think of it as as additional income source, I personally, one of my first ADU actually was my own home. And so I do have experience with that and navigating the LA Housing Department's regulations. And my ADU is actually was converted from part of my main residence. And there are rent stabilization limitations also. So I think homeowners do need to do research on that front too.
If they're planning on renting it out.
Yeah, and things are
Yeah.
constantly changing, it feels.
Yes, they're changing very fast.
Yeah.
But what does seem to be clear is they might have made a teeny dent in the kind of how, affordability crisis or access to housing at something of a manageable rent, but it doesn't sound like it's really solved the problem. That's not been the role that they have fulfilled. They've fulfilled another role. We do have a few minutes for questions. Does anybody want to pose a question to any of our panelists? Here we go, over there.
Hold on.
This is a question for Alloy. I wondered, you did an ADU with a pool on top. I wondered how you supported that.
A pool on top.
yeah, that's one of the affordable ADUs. So yeah, anti-gravity systems. It's pretty interesting. I'll tell you later. No, so that particular house, we remodeled their house. We designed their house, remodeled their house. Then they wanted an ADU. So that one, which is on the screen over there, it's blazed. It's 2-story ADU, but it goes down the hill, and on top, so there's sort of 3 levels. There's the upper patio, which the main house uses, which with the pool, and there's 2 levels below, which is ADU as it goes down. But the pool itself, the walls of the pool, we have structural steel inside the walls of the pool because water and concrete are one of the most heavy objects in existence. So using the vertical walls of each side of the pool allowed us to have that cantilever.
Wow. Other questions?
Right here.
As you're getting into retirement age, not me, but other people, and you're getting rid of you have a pool that's an expense, would you recommend taking out the pool and adding an ADU?
In the pool. Could that be an underground ADU?
Yeah, I would. I mean, honestly, it's a great, ADU's a great second source of income, or main source, if you will, if you're into retirement. Pools are very expensive. The cost to take care of them, plus if you're heating a pool, I mean, it's a lot of money. And if you're not already set up for solar, I saw a big wave of people just getting rid of pools over the last maybe the last decade. They are coming back in a lot of situations, but we build them differently. If you're not, people always say, should I put in a pool? And my answer is always, are you going to swim in it? And if the answer is no, then it's not a good thing to put in your backyard. It's just really that simple. right? It's true. So, yeah, it's not that expensive to fill a pool in and just build on top of it. It's really not. That's a great way to do it.
Hi, so I want to better understand this ADU condo concept. So are you saying, like, you could sell the ADU eventually, but not the land under the ADU?
I had the same question. I'm curious too about that.
And then, well, there's a part 2 to this question also.
Okay, the answer is yes.
Okay. And then, so let's say you did that, and then you go to sell your main home later and the land under your main home. Does that mean the new buyer's kind of stuck with that other person in the back?
Yes.
Yeah.
The
that's
mad
right.
woman in the
Pretty
attic.
much, that's right. Yeah, it would be kind of similar to a standard condo situation. So if you had like a multi-unit condo, then, and you move in, you buy a unit, yeah, your neighbors are your neighbors.
And this is a concept that started in Europe. I think like Estonia had a program where they were doing student senior shares so that students could get equity in the homes of the seniors they were helping take care of, because seniors couldn't afford to take care of themselves and they couldn't afford to go into assisted living. So there's programs in Toronto, there's programs all over the world that do these types of things, equity share, where your work that you perform is buying into the home as an equity share, and in turn you get to live there for free. So there's a million different ways to do it. We don't do a lot of it here. It's a great way to support both sides of the sandwich generation in situations where there's not children in between as well. So I love these programs. I love these ideas. They're fantastic.
It's
They will solve problems.
Yeah, it's very interesting how California is trying to figure out how to solve for all these different issues that have sort of emerged from kind of this sort of binary system that we've kind of had. You know, you either buy a home or you rent a home, and perhaps there's a condo in the middle. But to your question, I'm wondering, okay, what about this, Marco? So you've turned now your ADU into a condo using the bill that you mentioned. Can you also then use SB 9, which is this other bill that does allow for building a couple more units on the lot or even lot splitting? Could you sort of overlay SB 9 because you want to get rid of that condo person at the end of the yard that you don't want to be attached to when you sell your property? Could you kind of flip the land into a... You can't?
No. Well, so as of now, SB 9 has been like recalled or whatever you call it. They've canceled it essentially.
They've cancelled it?
Yeah. So yeah, the state. So there are several, like Redondo Beach. There's a couple cities that sued. I think the state.
They sued, yes.
So I think LA City you can't do an SB 9 anymore.
Oh, in the city, but
Yeah,
it hasn't
I
cancelled
don't.
it statewide.
You have to check. Yeah, Google that. Just double check. But I don't think SB 9s are allowed anymore. Or I'm not sure if it's just LA City. It was controversial because they were finding that the SB 9 developments weren't actually helping with affordability. So, which I find funny or strange, because I wonder if the ADU by itself law is helping with affordability, but for some reason they found just the SB 9 law is not.
Well, because, frankly speaking, the ADU is very appealing to the homeowner. The SB 9 law was not appealing to the homeowner because it represented the idea of the developer coming in and buying up lots and suddenly putting up 4 or more units. So
Right.
it has been politically less palatable. So I do wonder if that's at stake, because that's what was going on with Redondo Beach.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But also strangely, SB 9s were very unpopular, especially in the city of LA.
Right.
And I think it's probably because of the time it takes to get the SB 9 approved.
Right.
Because you have to do the lot split. A lot of people do the lot split. For those of you who don't know, the SB 9 it's called the duplex or the double duplex law. So you can either split the lot and you build 2 units in the front lot and 2 full single-family homes in the back lot, or you just build 2 single-family homes. So.
I'd heard there was a good number of SB 9s going up in the valley, that the lots are larger and there was sort of less resistance. But we have a couple of minutes more, so is there any more questions? Here we go.
Hi, this is probably more for Joan. You mentioned it earlier, but so my company, we do air conditioning and solar. So we kind of work on that side, and we work with a lot of ADU companies. So how are you guys sort of advising your clients on like the Title 24 requirements? And you know, you mentioned that there seems to be a lot of variability, right, everywhere we go, where they're saying, oh, we'll just put up 4 panels here, we'll do 8 panels here. Right. But like, I'm always curious from like the builder's side of like what people are, or how they view that, or what kind of relationship they bring their clients through in regards to solar as they're kind of talking about it.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's an important question because the conversation around solar is changing yet again, and so I think you have to design your project very specifically for, if you're trying to get an exemption, you really have to understand the energy codes, the new energy codes, right? So there's 5 exemptions. And if you're doing a remodel, you might not be able to get one of them if you're not familiar with them. And if you're doing a new construction, maybe you can. But most people want to put solar on their homes now, I'm finding, if there's a way to do it. Where I'm finding difficulty is with people who are renting out their homes. So if they're renting, as you know, you have to buy the equipment technically because you can't rent the equipment if you have renters. So it's a tougher sell around that audience, which is where it becomes important to find a way to not to have to do it if the owner doesn't want to. Because sometimes the project will fall through. I mean, quite honestly, and I think you're seeing that. My understanding is that the solar industry has been greatly impacted by the new rules going into effect. And everyone that I talk to says that solar now has a bad reputation, as if the codes are a reflection of your industry, whereas your industry is just trying to keep up with it. And that's unfortunate. So I think there might need to be some tweaks to what the rules are in Los Angeles in particular around whether or not you're required to have it. San Diego has different rules. 760 square feet or less, there's an exemption, and we don't have that right now here. I think it's nice. So, again, for the most part, people are interested in it if they can afford it because they see the long-term benefit of having it. You guys come in, you do your math, you go, your buyback is 3 years, great. You're gonna have a 0 energy bill, fantastic. You have a pool, even better. How many panels do I need? So it depends on the situation.
We are pretty much out of time. Josh, you're in charge. Is there time for any more questions, or should we wrap?
Is there one more?
I think there was
Yeah?
one over here.
I see a little hand over here.
Yes.
There's been a lot of discussion about how to work with the lot as a whole. And I think ADUs pose a particular problem for that because of what the panel was saying in terms of the use changes over time. And so how do you allot the planning of the hardscape, the landscape, for those multiple years of use, whether you're a sandwich generation or et cetera? I mean, how do you plan for the lands around the ADUs?
I mean, actually, landscape was a big part of the conversation that I feel like we didn't get to because that is a huge part, like the space between the ADU and the home. But I guess we just do some phased designing. We'll always try to consider like what would happen now when you're just using the ADU as more of like a pool house and you need like an outdoor space separating it from the main house versus years from now when you need more connectivity.
Thank you so much
scenarios.
for bringing that up. No, because it is really important. Obviously, that differs if the ADU is facing outwards. It's a rental unit. You don't even have to think about that in that way, it would seem. But anyway, Marcos.
There's one more. One of the benefits of tearing down a garage to build a new ADU is you're able to relocate where it's going to go. So, because most homes will have the rear garage, you have the long driveway, you have the garage in the back. So oftentimes if you're remodeling the garage or converting the garage to an ADU, the ADU is there. So it creates that awkward trapezoid of a driveway and then the rear yard is off to the side. So if you do build a new ADU, you're able to locate it sometimes on the opposite side, which creates a much larger usable landscape. So whether in phase 1 it's a driveway or phase 2 it's a garden or whatnot. So I think that's one of just the benefits of building a new ADU. And then solar orientation is also important. When you buy your lot, it's either, maybe the short side of the rectangle is facing south or vice versa. So by relocating the ADU to invite sun is also helpful, which also helps with planting and whatnot.
And one ADU architect I was talking to was telling me that actually the paradox was that he starts out with a big yard, he plops the ADU in it, but configures it in such a way that this yard that's now actually square footage-wise smaller feels bigger because he subdivides the yard into kind of 3 little zones. So he makes these more sort of identifiable, discrete zones, and that seemed to really work. But there's many more questions one could ask. Are you able to hang out for a few minutes and catch up with people privately if they have more questions?
Sure, yeah.
Well, thank you all for being here and being part of this conversation. And thanks to our speakers, designers, contractors, Joan Barton, Marcos Santa Anna, and A.G. Rue. Thank you so much.